So as for this week, are we together? Now we are starting our 6th week or 5th week. It is the 5th week. We are starting and we are going to be learning some topics that are a little bit advanced, and we find them somehow a little bit confusing. But as you are going to be doing some practice, they are going to get much more clearer than they are. We're going to cover generics, lambda expressions, and streams in Java. So one thing I would recommend you is to take your time and, do a thorough research on those topics. Today we're going to look at generics and try to understand why do we need them, or what is it about with generics. The next day on Monday, we are going to go even deeper in generics on let me say, a little bit even more focused topic on generics. But today we first start with understanding why do we need generics, how are they used. And of course, you're going to do some classwork, then an assignment on generics. I highly advise you to take your time and look at generics in deep, do some research, and also on lambda expressions, so that when we are going to be learning that in the next week, we are going to be focusing on deepening our knowledge on those topics, right? Great. So now we are talking about generics. In Java, generics are most of the times when we say generics in Java, we are talking about a concept called type safety. You might ask yourself, like, what does it mean, type safety? But as you understand, in the word type safety, we have there is a term type, right? Data type. Get a point. So which kind of data types do we know? We have strings, integers, float, double, and so on, right? Characters and so on. So the reason why we need to have type safety is to ensure that our programs can run as expected, right? So just imagine, as an example we're going to see here, if, for example, you had, let's say, you wanted to create a calculator app, right? And your calculator app, you expect to get, let me say, doubles, right? So that you can do multiplications and divisions. And then a person invokes a method to let's say, divide two numbers, but instead of writing numbers, he writes strings. He writes 2 as a string, right? Let's say he writes 2 plus 3, right? And in some conditions, the program is not going to throw an error when you are calling a method. The program might be like, okay, that's fine. But then when you run your code, you get an error. But when you're writing the code, it was fine, right? So most of the times when you're talking about type safety, we are trying to provide security to our program when it is running or being executed, right? And another scenario in which you're going to learn or use type safety is when you're going to be dealing with applications like, let me say, databases or APIs. For example, let me find an easy way to demonstrate it. Okay, for example, let's say we have this is our application. We have the database, we have a server, and we have our front end, right? So, for example, we might say we are dealing with a student management system, and the following data are the ones that we are going to be dealing with. Let's say a student is going to have an ID, right? Type string, a name of type string. Let me say grade, maybe grade of type, let's say character. And then the student is also going to have a phone number, for instance, an email. And whenever you are dealing with databases, you are going to be having extra attributes that are created by our database that stores the date at which your record or your data was recorded. And if you modify that data, they are going to add another one called updated at. For now, let's say it is going to be a string, and then updated at as also as a string, right? So, but let's say you say every user I'm going to be storing in my database is going to be having the same structure like this, right? This is one user. So if I create another student, they are going to be having the same thing. And you have 10 students. And you say, for me in the front end, I want to display a list of all the students I have, right? For example, you want to have these students to the front end. And for you, all you want from the list of students is just the ID of the student, the name, the phone number, and just this. This is all you want in the front end, right? For every student. So you can have, let's say, this is student one, student two, and so on. And all the following are the information those students are going to be having, right? Or maybe you say, I want to create a new student, right? So this is, let's say, let me call this maybe listing students. This is going to be to list students. This should be the output if we are trying to list the students that we have. This is what our backend should give us. So our backend is going to go to the database. It fetches the students, it modifies their information, and it makes sure that it gives me data that looks like this, right? But let's say now I want to create a new user, right? A new student. As for example, I said that there are input fields that, or there are data that are provided when you create a user that by the database. For example, the created at and updated at, and even the ID, it is provided by the database automatically, or provided by the server you're using according to the type of way of generating IDs you're using. So in this scenario, you're not going to provide the ID. You're simply going to provide the name, grade, phone number, and email. And this is the information you simply are required to provide if you want to create a new student in your system. Right? So I feel like this is clear, right? Now the problem comes when you as a user, right? You've provided this structure as the structure that the system needs to follow, right? And you say, for me to add a new user, I simply need the name, grade, phone number, and email, right? And then someone, all of a sudden, provided extra information that are needed, right? Or they forget to provide some information. Or maybe when trying to list, right? you as a developer, you need to precise what exactly do I want my output to look like, right? So this is where now you need to create, let's say, a model, right? For how your student information needs to look like, right? Otherwise, if you are going to display this information from the database and send it to the front end, they are going to send them all this information and you don't need them, right? So you need to specify the type of information you need the user to have, right? And you also need to specify the type of information you need to send to your server when you are creating a new user, right? So this, we are going to see it a lot when we are dealing with Spring Boot, but we are going to get a small example of how this would work here when we are learning generics. So now you understand two scenarios. A scenario when you are just dealing with simple, data type. For example, you're trying to do an operation and someone is providing the wrong data type. For example, the first example you said was for a calculator. You expect numbers to be the input and someone is providing maybe strings. Or maybe you expected only integers and someone is providing double. Or you expected double and someone is providing integers. Stuff like that. So the funny thing is, when you are coding, the IDE sometimes is not going to tell you that what you did is wrong. But when you run the program, it fails, right? So those are called runtime error, right? So most of what type safety is here to do is to help you make sure that whenever you are coding, you also mitigate or avoid those runtime errors. Okay, so now let's look at a short demonstration of how this would look like. So for example, if you can look in your code, they say that before the coming of generics, whenever, for example, you had an array list, right? Let's say, let me create an array list here and just make it a list. Let me say list of gross. Or let me just call it a list for now. So here, it is just an array list. We don't know if it's going to be a list of numbers, a list of groceries, a list of characters. It's just a list, right? So, and you know the function to add an element to a list. Is it small? The other, this is what you're saying. Yeah, that is generics. Actually, you've been using generics, but we didn't yet get to the point of generics. But you can still create an array list like this, right? But this way, you didn't specify if it is like, what is it? Like, it is an array list of what? That's the problem, right? Still, you could still come here and write list list.add. And for example, let me add a text. Let's say, let me write a link. Okay. In this list, I can even add a number. Let me say 2, and it will still work. Simply because I didn't specify what kind of list are you talking about, right? So grammatically, it's fine, right? And even if I would even display the content of this list, it would still be fine. Let me use a for loop for how would you even display this information without knowing the data type? So let me say, for example, I want to get the element of the first index, for example, list dot get element at index 0. Let me get element at index 1. As you can see, this code is going to run. This is an array list, and you didn't do any mistake, right? And now let's say you want to loop through this list and add a number, right? Let's say you have sometimes you'd have, let's say, a problem where they tell you have an array list or a list of 10 digits, and we want you to make sure that for every number you add 2, right? So do you now start to see where the problem is going to be? You cannot add a number to a string. It's going to give you problems, right? So let's say we use a loop. Let's say list dot, how do we get the size of a list? Dot size, right? And then we say for every item in our list, we add 2. So I would write list dot get a number on a specific index plus 2. So the output would be list, or let me just write list dot set xi. I want it to be, let me hope what I'm doing is correct. I'm trying to change the value of an item on a specific index. So I would write the set, you start with 2 parameters, the index and the element. So on index I want to provide, let me just try to destructure it here and write, these are integers. So let me write int, let me say double is equal to plus 2 like this. Why is it? Oh, sorry. Int, let me just call it x. And list.get ID should give us a value at index 1 or the first index, whatever it is, right? But you can see here we still have troubles because since they don't really know the data type that we are dealing with here, they're just treating it as an object. You get the point? Since they don't know the data types that we are dealing with here. So this becomes an issue. You can't even add this data, right? So let me find another problem that can be caused by having an array list without specifying the data type. So this is the first issue. We don't know the data type, so we can't really know if we're dealing with a string or a number. So now let's say let me use what you have in your notes. Okay, so now let's see if we had generics, how this would look like. or if it would cause some errors. So let's say our array list, now we specify that this array list is going to contain integers, right? So how do you think we would write integer? Integers in capital, right? Why? Simply because this is not going to be like the usual data type we provided. Here you provide a class name. And you remember that we always say that everything in Java is a class, right? And even data types are classes, right? So you provide integer here. Don't we provide something else here at the end? And now you see that our code is going to start giving us warning, right? So since I've defined that this array list is going to be containing integers, I could no longer use strings in this array list, right? So I need to provide, let's say, 3. So let's see if code is now going to. So I guess you can see that now the issue is resolved, right? Simply because they are like, let's say the program was still confused. It was like, is he trying to add an, like, whenever you didn't provide the data type, it just assumes it is an object, right? Generally. So in this scenario, we can add 2 to every value in this array list. And then let's say, let me create another loop to display the content. And in this scenario, I can even use the enhanced for loop. Before, I couldn't use an enhanced for loop because I didn't know what I was dealing with. So for each integer I in our list, I want to simply display the value that was multiplied by 2, was added to 2. So I would write I. So you remember that here we had 3, 2. Let me add another 2 numbers. Let me say 4 and 6, right? So we expect to get here 5, 4, 6, and 8, right? So you can see that. So where did these 3 come from? Oh yeah, they are from here. So our output are these, right? So this was possible simply because we are specific about the data type we are trying to deal with, right? So now let's go even deeper. For example, let's try to create a program that is going to, let me create a new file. We're going to create a class and call it box. And we're going to use it now. For that scenario, we're just dealing with what you call, is it primitive data types? The simple data types that we're dealing with, like integers, even integers, I don't think they're called. These integers, doubles, primitive, right? We're just dealing with primitive data types. But now if you start to deal with classes, now we need to even be more cautious. So let's see how that would look like. Let's say we have a class called box, and let me say we want this class to contain any type of information. In fact, you can use generics to write what you call reusable code, right? So you remember the way that whenever we wanted to create a new class, we created the model, right? If we are using students, we create a model for students. If we are dealing with maybe courses, we are creating a model for courses. And maybe let's say you don't want to go through that stress every time you want to just create a small class. So we're going to create a generic class, right? A class that you can use, you can provide numbers, you can provide characters, and it will still work, right? So for example, here, that's when we now bring the other equal and less signs and now provide T. And this T is going to stand for any data type that you don't know for the moment, right? And then, so I guess you can now start to see how this relates with this, right? So here, if you provide double, then the data type becomes double, right? So this one we are going to use to stand for any other data type that we don't know yet. So I'm going to provide some input, and for our input, since we don't want to provide the data type now, we want it to hold any type of data type we're dealing with. Let me call it T as well, and then say content, right? So we're just trying to be general, right? We want to use this class to hold any type of information you want. Even if you want to create setters and getters, right? You remember, for example, if we had a class like, let me just create a small class and call it book and create, let's say, private string name. If you wanted to create a setter for that class, you'd, let me just generate it automatically. Setters and getters. Here you provide this data type, right? And then you return information if it is for a getter, and for a setter, you need to provide the data type here, right? But for us, you want to be general, right? So in this scenario, if we start with a getter, would instead of providing the specific data type here, we're going to provide a general data type. So let me generate it automatically. So you can see that instead of the data type, the specific data type, we replace it with the data type we don't know yet. Get the point? So now let's go back to the main class. Let me create a new main class to simplify this. So in this main class, we are going to create, let's say, a box that can hold an integer, right? So I'll write a box. And since I want the box to contain integers, I can now specify what I want to be the content of the box, and then write integer box is equal to new box, and we are fine. So it means that in this scenario, I'm using the box class to only hold integers. So I can say, for example, integer box will set content. So let me provide some numbers, right? So this is correct. Since I said I want my box class to contain integers, and this box class is just being used as a general class you can use, and this key is going to be a placeholder. It is going to hold whatever you specify as the data type, right? I can still use this to create a box of text. Let's say box of name, sorry, string, and this box is going to contain names, for example. This scenario, I would write, for example, names dot set content and provide a string. Who wants to be here? And in this scenario, now our box class is holding names, right? And now let's see what else we can do here. So let's say we want to now create a function in this box class, and this function should, for example, I'm trying to come up with a fictional example. Allow me to come up with something a little bit complicated. Maybe, let me hope we are going to make it. So let's look at, by the way, let me hope this is getting clear, right? So you can either use generics to specify, like to avoid type errors when you're coding, especially errors that are executed on runtime. So we had seen that we can use generics to avoid mistakes that can happen when we are coding and everything we are doing is fine, but when we run, we get errors, right? Or even when you're trying to write the codes, you can still get errors. And we can also use generics to create classes that are reusable, right? Instead of creating a box class to hold for integers, a box class for strings, a box class for characters, we just create one class and use it for other things that you want to do, right? So now let me try to bring it in a even more real world scenario that we are going to be using in Spring Boot. Let me hope it's going to work. So let's say, let's come back to the other example of what were we doing here? It was about students, right? So let's create a student class. Let's say our student is going to have name, ID, name, grade, phone number, email, and private string ID, private string name, private string phone, grade. The grade is going to be a character, right? And then the email is going to be string. And then we have the created app and updated. Anyway, I want to make sure that the data type for created app and updated that are correct. Okay, let's use local date type. By the way, have you started? Oh, sorry. Sorry. I was asking if you have started dealing with this. Have you ever worked on a exercise where you can use this? Please try the other assignment I said. The other, is it how is it called? To do let me check. Personal ATM simulator. The new version of the personal ATM simulator, you are required to create a project where you can log everything that the person is doing in the ATM. I don't know if you worked on it, but this is how it looks like. I'm just going to give you the output. Let's show you the code. So if you run this program, it has the same structure as something that we tried to do here. So let's say I have my ATM and I want to deposit. I click one, choose to deposit, then I provide the amount I want to deposit. Then the amount is deposited and I want to check the balance. My balance is 5,000 and maybe I want to withdraw two. And then let me say I want to withdraw 6,000. It is not going to work, right? So if I could still check the balance, my current balance is still 5,000. If I want to deposit again, I provide more data and then my new balance is this. So our personal ATM simulator, the purpose was for you to apply the skills of what we had learned already in Java input output, where you can be logging all those activities a person is doing inside a file, right? Of course, as we are going to be learning, we are going to get to a point where you can have, let me say, there are going to be frameworks that are going to be helping us to do this. But for now, you need to understand how this works. So for example, in this scenario, I don't know if it has updated the data or not, but this is what you should look like. For example, if you deposit, it logs what you deposited, right? It tells you the time at which that deposit was done. Of course, this data is not updated. And then it tells you the balance you have. If you deposit again, this. If you try to withdraw an amount which is bigger than what you have in your account, then it tells you an error message. So most of the times when people are building systems or very, let me say, sensitive systems, they rely on these logs to know what happened in the system and when it happened, and it could even help them to get an idea of what happened. Because once you deploy your project, you're not going to be running it in your IntelliJ, right? It is being run on a server. So how are you going to know where the error is, right? So you're no longer the one who is running the project. So when you have a very long list of logs, you can come and track the time at which that happened. It gives you it gives you error message, like detailed information about the error that happened and who did that and stuff like that. So that is what sometimes developers base on when they're trying to resolve issues that happened in their systems, right? So this was the purpose. The reason why I'm talking about dates is if you've worked on that task, you should have played around with dates. So please try it, and it is through doing this exercise, you're going to do a little bit research on how to play around with dates, right? Wait, so let's continue what we are doing. So local date time is a data type for dates. So let's provide some getters and setters and yes, characters. Use capital when you are, for example, dealing with generics. Or there are even other scenarios where you use characters and capital. But for example, if you wanted to create a box, where is it? Like this, a box of characters. You write it like this, not with small characters, right? But for now, since it is just a primitive data type we're trying to deal with, we just write it like that with small character like this, right? Okay, so let's provide some constructor. This is a parameterized constructor. We can even generate a non-parameterized constructor. By the way, for your information, when you're going to be, how can I unselect? Yes. There are tools that can help you to build a class like this without needing to always come and create non-parameterized constructor, parameterized constructors, and you can also you write the getters and setters. Of course, our IDEs give us a way to generate them automatically, but in some scenarios, it is not even ideal. Like the code becomes too much. Let me say it like that. Let me, for example, show you a simple example about how if you're just writing these trying to look for an example. Okay. So for example, look at this. I'm going to zoom it in. Look at this class called opportunity, for example. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 variables, right? And just imagine if you have to create constructors for them, create getters and setters for 11 input, 11 variables. So you're going to create 21 functions, methods, right? So sometimes the code is going to be like messy, right? So there are tools, for example, like a tool called the Lombok, which can generate the getters and setters and parameterize and non-parameterized constructors for you, right? But this, for now, we need to understand how to do it ourselves manually, right? So now let's come back here. So here we managed to generate this. So now we want, for example, to do, let's say, to display our students, but let's start by creating some functions for our students. Let's start by providing information to our students. Let's create the first student. The first student, let me call it ST1. New student. And since we have the parameterized constructor, we can automatically provide the student information inside these parameters, right? Otherwise, if we didn't have this thing called a parameterized constructor, if we wanted to provide every input for the student, we would come here and write st1 dot set, let's say name, write the name st1 dot set, email st1 dot set. So you understand that it is too much code, right? But when you have the parameterized constructor, there is a shortcut where you can come here and start providing the information. For example, let me start with ID1. Then I continue with, let me try to put it somewhere aside so that it can be easy for me. I want to know the way the order. So you have the ID, then we have the name. Who will want to be the first student? Who want to be the first student, not Anne. 16. 16. And the phone number, of course, I feel like the phone number is a string as well. So let's just provide a phone number. And then the grade, how much do you want to give her? The grade, it is a character. Age. By the way, characters should go inside single quotations. And then the email is going to be, let's say, christine@gmail.com. Then we have what else? We have the email. So now let's create these dates. So let's say created at. So we're going to local date time. Created. Let's say creation date. By the way, I feel like you could write new for date. Let me say new date. Let me see. Let me import it. Let me see how I create this page. Sorry, I want to check on how to deal with dates. So I want to generate the date and the time. So we are going to use local date. Local date looks like this. If you want to generate just the string like this, you use local time.now. I want something like this. Or I don't want to complicate it for now. So let me just generate this date like this. So I'm going to use local date time, which is provided by this code. Okay, I feel like I need to let me create a function which is going to be creating users because I can't do this over and over. This is not practical. So let me create the function here. Function to create users. Let me just put it here. Public static. I guess you understand why we use static here. You understand why we use static here? Yes. Public static student add student. Let me just make it wait because I simply want to add a user and that's it. Or let me just write student. I want to put this logic inside the function. Simplify code. So instead of this information here, up to here, I'm going to put it here, and the ID, I want it to be created randomly. So the ID, I want a string ID. So let me just, for example, write ID like this. Write the ID here. Then I'm going to also have the name. Actually, this is not correct. This is not appropriate. Here I should have the name. I should have the what else? Phone number, grade, and email. As per order, name, phone, grade, email, right? Oh, I didn't provide the data types. Sorry. String, name, phone, character, grade, string, email. So here I provide the ID, we already have it, the name, the phone, the grade, and the email, and that's it. And after adding a user, we need to return the new added student because the return type is student, so we return st1. So here, let's provide, let's say, the code to generate our random IDs, right? So now, how do we generate random numbers? Let's start with having our ID as digits, right? Or should we change our data type here for IDs to numbers for now? So we just generate random integers, right? Let's just make it integer. And therefore, we need to change here. We need to change here and where is? And here as well. And here now we are set. So come again.
What?
Really, these students.
I think
Where? Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, now let's generate a random ID. How do we do that? Okay, so the generated value should be, okay, let's put it here. At dot random. And we want our IDs to be between 1 and 100. Right? So how do we do it? Times 100. What is the error? Oh, yeah, sure. So we need to either cast the expression into integers. I feel like that is what is better because math.random is going to give us a number between 0 and 1. So between 0 and 1, you have 0.1, 0.8, something like that. And those are doubles, right? So we need to make sure that whenever even though we multiplied by 100, the data is going to still be double. So we need to convert it back to integer. So here we have our integer. So every time we create a new student, we're going to be creating a random ID, and we're going to be creating the date and the updated time. And these are going to be provided automatically. So all a user needs to do to provide is the name, phone, grade, and email, right? So let's do it here. So I'm going to write add student, and since this function is going to return a value, let me write student st1, for example, and provide the information I want that student to have. So we only need the name. So the name is going to be Christine. And we also need the phone number, which is a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 digits. We need the grade, let's give her age, and the email is going to be Christine@email.com, for example. And the character should be in single quotation. Yeah, I deleted it. Yeah. So now let's create 5 more students. But we don't need this for now, since our purpose is to just create the students. Who else wants to be on this list? That is Anne has already been on the list. Yeah, we should add Chanel as well. One of the people who really speak in class. Does he even like make noise? What is Chanel? So how much do you want to give Micheline? What about that is? Ariel? B? Florence? Chanel? Let's write Michu. And okay, good. So now we have our students. We have a function that displays our students. And let's now try to display our students here. Let's use a enhanced for loop. We say for every student I get, I want from the array of students, by the way, where are the students? We should create another function to display the students. Public static void display student. Either way, I'm wondering, okay, no, like where are this information going? When we add student, do you have a store for students? Like, I feel like we should create, yeah, we should create, let's say, an array list, right? That contains students, right? all information that you're going to be adding, what should be here? Student as well? Oh, no, no. What did I do? So this function, whenever I say add student, I add the student to the students, right? So I should do like this afterward. Students add, but students is not accessible. So how can I do this? Oh yeah, remember that add student returns a student, right? So I simply come here and say, I don't want to complicate things, but because adding a student, we would write students dot add, then I provide the added student, right? But you know that this add student is going to return a student, right? So I hope if I do it like this, you won't get confused. Okay. Students dot add. Let me duplicate it 5 more times. This, 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 this. Okay, so now here we are sure that we have added students to these students arrays, right? So if you wanted to now display students, we would call display students. And I'm trying to see how we can still can't access students from here. So I feel like we're going to provide the students you want to display. And here we say that it accepts an array of students. So it's going to be looking like it's right? So if you are talking about arrays, so this means an array of students. I feel like I guess this is understandable, is it? Okay. So now let's now start displaying each students. Can we create a toString function here to make our life easy? Because you don't want to be saying name plus whatever, right? So let's create a toString function. Let's see if we can generate it. Yes, we can. And here it is going to give us the information of the student. So do you see now why we have override? Who can tell us why we have override? Who can tell us why we now have override when we try to write toString? And we've been learning this in the first few days. Yes, Ayet. Can you repeat again? Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, you are a little bit near. Someone else? Yes.
it's a method already exists in the rest of object. So it have its implementations. When you code it, it comes with it, and you have to customize it to your need.
Yeah, that's true. So this toString method is always available for every class we create. It's already there, right? So since we want to modify it, literally here, this is not just the computer generated, but you can modify it in the way you want, but it was already defined, right, for us. So since we want to modify it, we want to override the existing implementation, then we need to specify override, right? You remember when we were learning, was it inheritance, or I feel like we used override in inheritance, right? Where is it in inheritance? Yeah. So I guess you remember that, for example, if a parent class had some functions and a child class has to want to do some different implementation about from the parent methods, they had to override them. And you also use override when you're dealing with abstract classes or interfaces, right? Like sometimes they just define what the function is going to do, but they don't provide the implementation, the specific implementation about what that function or method is going to do. So it's up to you now to write the code inside the method. So for us, our toString is going to be looking like this. So if I now come here and write st toString, then I'm going to get all the information for each student. So for the beginning, let's start by, why is it, is there an error here? Oh, sorry. So if you wanted to say that this is going to receive an array list, how should we write it? An array list of students. No more error. So this is not just going to receive an array, it's just an array list instead. So let's run our program and see what it is going to give us. And for us here, we would just have implemented this feature for adding students. I guess you can see that we only added some few information, I mean here, and we are going to store different information, right? And now we are going to try to display it, and then that's where we're going to transform our logic here. We say, what do we specifically want to get as the output? Then this is when you're going to start to use generics in this project that you're working on. What is our fault? Or I'm running the wrong one. Yeah, I'm running the wrong one. So I guess you can see the names of our students, right? So I guess you can see the ID was added and the dates they updated at and created that was added as well, right? So now, as you can see, we can see that we have our students, right? For example, I want to say, I want to specifically send to the front end, right? Only the following information: ID, name, grade, phone number, and email only. See that? So what are we going to do? Let me create a function, or let me create another class here and call it, most of the times it is going to be inside a now. Okay. I'm not really understanding. Yes. So the Alice and the Alice and everything. So give me a second, and if you like, you could take a short break for 5 minutes. Come back here. So shall we continue? So here we have defined our model for the student. Here, let's say in our main class, we have two functions, one that can be used to add a student, another one that can be used to display a student. And now let's see how we can use generics to either add or display student information. So what you're going to see here is something that you're going to, it's like something that you're going to be seeing a lot when you're going to be building APIs. And it is, most of the times we are going to be having a folder called DTOs, right? And there is a folder, another folder, which is going to be called domain or sometimes called model. In that folder, we're going to be putting these files like, for example, student. We're going to be putting book, yes, book as well. And this is just to make sure that we enforce a given a specific structure so that whoever is going to look at this code, they're going to understand where to find things, right? So for example, box has a model as well, right? And then we're going to be having a main class, all of this in our projects. And then in the DTO, we're going to be having something that looks almost similar to the model, but with a different structure. But before we even go far, what does a DTO mean? A DTO is an acronym for data transfer object, DTO. So a DTO is an acronym which means data transfer object. Is an object used to transfer data between software application subsystems. And details do not contain business logic or like only data are used to reduce the number of calls between layers involving performance. So it looks like a simple model, right? But it helps you to specify what like different parts of your system are going to be giving each other as information, right? So for example, we want to make sure that, let's start with displaying, right? Or let's start with creating. Let's start with creating. Here we have, allow me to close all these classes we are not using. Here we have a student object, right? So this information is what is going to go to the database, right? But we want to say, if I want to create a student, I simply need the following information: name, phone, grade, and email, right? This is the only information I want. So I can come here and create a DTO. Let's say create student DTO, for example. And in this create student DTO, I'm going to only specify the information about the student that I want to provide to you. So in this case, it is the name, public, sorry, private link name. Let me be as fast as I can. Need the name, phone number, grade, and email. These are the only information we need. Then we provide the constructors, the getters, and setters. Generate constructor. Let me start with non-parameterized constructor and then parameterized constructor. Using control to select all of them. And then let me add getters and setters. Let's generate getter and setter. Then I use shift or control to select all the variables I want to deal with. So here I have a create student DTO. Let me also create another DTO and call it display student DTO. So whenever I want to display information of a student, I want to take this information in addition to ID. And ID, we say that it is an integer. Am I correct? Let me generate the getters and setters as well, and constructor again. Okay, so this is the, whenever we want to output information, we're going to make sure that the data type of the information you're outputting is of display student DTO, right? This restricts the information we are allowed to send to as the output. If you want, for example, to display students, right? And let's take another scenario. If you wanted to, if this student, for example, had passwords and stuff like that, right? You don't want everyone to see the passwords for students. You want to limit them to what they are allowed to see, right? So when you say the output of my function, for example, if I come back here to generic classes and I say I want to display students, I'm going to, in the array list, I'm going to provide here as the output, I'm going to say, oh, let me see what I can do here. Public static display student DTO. And it is going to be receiving all this information about the student, but what it is going to be returning is a different thing. So we are going to be taking, we're Let me see. Students that get name, get name, the name we provide. Oh no, let me see. Let's define a new variable here and we call it output data. New specimen and it should be an array list, sorry. Array list of display student DTO. And here again, array list like this, right? Now we are starting to specify. Here we got as our input an array list of students, like everything, assuming this is our database. Let's say this is our database. Where is it? This one, right? Assume this is where our data is stored, and we use this method to add that data to the database. And now I want to display my students. The database is going to provide you with everything it has, including the IDs, the email, the passwords, if there are any, the created art, the updated art information, right? But you, as the output, you want to send different information, right? So you want to make sure that we specify what you want to get as the output. And you remember that for our display student DTO, the information that you want to output is the following, right? So in that scenario, we are just going to be specifying whatever you want to get as the output, and that is what you're going to be providing. So I would say output data dot. Let me see. Oh, sorry. So I want to be putting this information dot set. I want to help you work on this. I want to take every information for a student and put it inside here. So how can we do it? Okay, then put that dot add. Sorry. And then I need to also start with we need to first get the information for every student and say display student DTO. Okay.
Canva, you say it is the first selected the particular plan.
Let us see. Does this exist? Does this even exist? Okay, let me just create a new variable here and call it story display student DTO. Data here display student DTO. And then write data dot set ID is going to be st dot get ID, right? So now this is where Java starts to get annoying. Now we are using set ID, get ID, whatever. So let me hope you're not going to get lost. And if you get lost, don't worry. Let me get done with it and I will explain to you. Email. The rest is grade I guess. Okay, so I have the that. And then I return output data. Okay, the output should be an array list. So I'm going to write array list of. So do you see how complicated it is? But this is what the command does to do. So here is what this code means. Remember, our student model looks like this, right? It has all this information. Sorry, it has all this information here, right? And for us, when we are displaying the output, we only want to display this information, right? And we need to make sure that no one, if any developer tries to use this to work on this project, we don't want him by accident to forget that this is what we have to export and then he provides extra information, right? So this is why we defined a DTO or a data transfer object containing specifying, sorry, where did it go? I want to expand. Here in our DTOs, we created a display student DTO, and we were specific about the information we want to provide when we are providing the output, right? So this is what we want for each student we want to do, right? Okay, now here we go to our function, our method to display students. Allow me to minimize this, right? So what we want to get as the output, we want to get a list of the students, where every student is going to be having the ID name, email, phone number, and grade only, right? So if now you want to say that you are going to output that specific array list, right? You're going to say output is going to be an array list of display student DTO, right? Because the display student DTO is the information that we specifically want to provide as output, right? So for us, our display student is, of course, it is going to have an array list of students, all students, providing with having all the information about those students. And we were saying that let's assume this student array list is our database for now, this one. So it has everything. So now, what we did here, we defined an array list, and this array list is the output we're going to provide. Remember, our method is going to output a list, right? So we defined that list of information here, right? And this is the one we are outputting here. Our next step is now providing the right information that we want to output. So here I use the for loop. We are going to go through the entire array list of students, right? And for each student, I want to only get the ID, name, email, phone number, and grade, right? So I created a new object called data, right, for each student with data type of display student DTO. And you remember what you have in display student DTO. We don't have created at and updated at, right? So now we are going to start providing this information. And when we say data.setID, you understand what it means. It's the setter to set the ID, right? And where is that ID going to come from? The ID is going to come from the student, right? And remember, student itself is also another model. So we say, to get the ID, you say st.getID, right? But since we want to add the ID to this data, we say data.setID. Get it? So this is now the reason why you need getters and setters. Sometimes you might use them, sometimes you might not. But you always need to make sure that for every model you create, you define getters and setters, right? So this is what we did here. We said data.setName to set the name to this new object, and the name is going to come from the student, right? Student.getName. So in few words, this is what this code means. My focus here today was to show you the way where we applied generics here, right? Where we said for us, we specifically need to output an array list of the following data type, right? And even when we are updating or creating, for example, you can even apply it here to add student and say, I only want to add students of the specific data type. For example, if you want to specify the type of the input, I feel like this is where you would provide but I think here it's not necessary. Like the place where you can understand it easily is in this scenario, for example, right? So this is another demonstration of where you can use generics in Java. So we've seen, I feel like 3 or 2 different ways. Like the first one is a simple way of just using generics where you can, I don't want to say it is just a simple way, but here we saw how you can create a class that you want to reuse, right? And this class can be used to define different objects of different data types. And this T is going to stand for a specific data type that you don't know for the moment, right? And then here another scenario where we used generics was, let me see what we have here. Here as well, we saw that before, when we didn't have generics in Java, right? It was very confusing to know which operations you are allowed to do, right? For example, you've seen that before we were trying to display or to even add some values to our array list. But since Java or our compiler didn't know whether an array list is an array list of integer or maybe string, it didn't really know what to do, right? But if you are specific and say, I want a specific array list of integer, then it is going to know operations that are allowed to be done on integers. If it is on strings, it is going to know the operations that can be done on strings. You get the point? So this is one of the reasons why we need generics in Java. So whenever they say type safety, that generics help us to enforce what we call type safety. This is what we are talking about. Any questions? Yes.
Going back to the first student, I was thinking if it has anything, why do you need to write it in there where, yeah. I thought maybe you would write it inside the method instead of writing only this. Then inside that display students.
Well, yes, this method, right?
The things student. I thought you would to make the coding easier, you would write the ABs display student or not, but inside there so that it's like this.
Okay, let me give you the computer so that you can modify it. Let me duplicate it and comment this one. Okay, show us what you're saying. Okay. But Millie is not going to understand you. Millie, you're going to excuse her. Yes, I'm going to explain what she's asking. Okay?
ArrayList that will display student detail. So it's my first new campaign kwenye twandika ibintu kuri message turimo turayidesigninga nayo nzi yuko ninamutuwa ko niba muri display student detail iriya array yose n'ubundi kandi ariyo dushaka n'ubundi display ariyo twandikira imbere muri iriya message instead of writing ArrayList student.
Here. Oh no. You remember that we are using. Oh no. You see, this display students, it's a function that we are calling. We have it here, right here, down here, and we are calling it from here in the main function, right? And we want to tell it what it has to display. And you remember that we have an array list of students, right? And we are considering this as our database. So we are telling it, display students, you need to display these specific students that we have defined here, right? So these students is the input or the information you're providing as parameters. So that's why we have it here. You see why? Because the data type that we are providing as input is of type array list of students. You understand that?
Yeah. But then why do you have to put that one there?
What?
The array list, I don't know if I would say as the data type.
Yeah, this is the data type. I don't think so. So this is the data type of our input.
No, the display student.
Display student detail. So I guess you know that for methods, we always provide the return type here, right? You know that?
Yes.
So we are trying to, this is the output you are trying to provide. Now we are specifying the data type of the output. Get it right? So we're saying our output should be an array list of information of the student, where the data type of that, each student is going to be having the data type of student, display student detail. I don't know if it makes sense. Does it?
So I'm getting like, if we need to make sure that the students' things are outputted, then we need to put that one there so that it can define the data types of the output.
Yeah. In fact, if you would say, for example, student, you would get an error here. Simply because the output this function is expecting is not what you are providing. Understand? Because if I could compare these two classes side by side, student and display student detail, you see that the information are different, right? If you say my output should be this one, and then you provide this as the output, then you are going to get an error. Understand that? Because this one expects only 5 input, and this here you're providing 7. So this is the reason why we had an error here. We said you want to display students, an array of students, display student DTO where you only have 5 output, but instead you are providing all the information. So the student, this information cannot fit inside this display student DTO. So even the error message you get here, yes, they will tell you, you are required to provide this, but you are instead providing this, simply because you are confusing the things, right? I hope at least you got an idea. Maybe we didn't confuse you. You have a question? Any other question? Okay. Great. So yeah, I think we can call it a day from here. And then you take some time and go through your notes. Your notes are even more detailed. Here we just saw a small bit of what you want to cover on generics. So you go even deeper, but I believe here we now have a general idea about what generics are about, right? So I'm going to post this code to GitHub and send it to you, and the recording is going to come shortly after.